Hello and welcome to Immersive History Chronicles. When we picture a Roman legionary, we imagine an unstoppable machine of conquest. Rows of red-plumed helmets, gleaming shields locked together in an unbreakable wall, marching across the known world and crushing every enemy in their path. We imagine a soldier who feared nothing, not even the harshest battlefield. But the truth is far colder and far more human. For the ordinary men who filled the ranks of Rome's legions, the deadliest enemy was rarely the barbarian across the river. It was the season that came after autumn. Tonight we'll step into the frozen boots of a Roman soldier on the northern frontier. We'll learn why the empire's own generals dreaded winter more than any army. Why more men died shivering in a tent than bleeding on a battlefield. And why one single winter disaster still echoes through history 2,000 years later. But before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps this channel keep telling these stories, and it means more than you know. I'd also love to hear where in the world you're watching from tonight, so drop it in the comments. Now let the modern world fade. Let us march north, into the mud, the frost, and the fear. Let's imagine you are this soldier. You are 19 years old, a legionary of Legio 19, somewhere on the Rhine frontier in the autumn of the year 9 AD. You are not a hero yet. You are simply tired, cold, and far from home. You signed your oath, your sacramentum, 3 years ago in a small town in Italy, drawn by the promise of steady pay and a plot of land waiting at the end of 25 years' service. Since then, your life has been marching, digging, and marching again. Today, the column has been on the road since before dawn, and the air has a bite to it that wasn't there last week. The leaves are gone from the German forests around you, and the mud beneath your hobnailed boots is beginning to stiffen with the first hard frost of the year. You don't know it yet, but the season closing in around you is about to become far more dangerous than any enemy warband. You wonder sometimes how you ended up here at all. The answer lies in the system that built the machine you now belong to. When you swore the sacramentum, you bound yourself absolutely to the emperor and to Rome, under penalty of death for desertion. Your pay, your stipendium is modest, and a portion of it is docked automatically for your food, your weapons, and your burial fund, whether you like it or not. Above you stands the centurion, a man who has clawed his way up through decades of service, and whose authority over you is total. His symbol of office is not a sword, but a vine staff, a vitis, and he uses it freely across the backs of slow or careless men. There is no vote here, no council of equals. There is the chain of command, and you are near the very bottom of it. This rigid, brutal discipline is precisely what makes the Legion the most feared fighting force on Earth in high summer. But what happens when that same iron discipline is asked to survive a season it was never built for? You find out soon enough. As the column halts for the night, you are handed a turf-cutting tool instead of a moment's rest. Roman doctrine demands a fortified marching camp, a castra, built from scratch every single evening, complete with a ditch, a rampart, and a wooden palisade. In summer, this is grueling but routine. Tonight, the ground has frozen just enough to turn every strike of the mattock into a jarring, bone-deep shock. Your hands already cracked from cold, blister and bleed inside your gloves. By the time the tents, the leather papiliones, are finally pitched, the temperature has dropped further, and you can see your own breath hanging in the torchlight. You're assigned to the night watch, standing motionless at the rampart for hours in the dark, and it is here that you learn the first true lesson of a winter campaign. Frostbite does not announce itself with pain. It arrives quietly as numbness, and by the time a man notices his fingers or toes have gone white and hard, real damage may already be done. Men who survive a sword wound without a scratch will lose fingers, toes, sometimes whole feet, to a single terrible night on watch. You begin to understand that the cold is not a discomfort to endure. It is an enemy that can kill you in your sleep, and it never once has to swing a blade. The cold alone would be bearable if your stomach were full, but it rarely is. Your daily allowance, the frumentum, is a ration of wheat, roughly a kilogram or so, meant to be ground and baked into bread at each night's camp. In good weather, supply carts and pack mules keep this ration steady, moving grain up from depots along the frontier. But winter turns the roads to frozen ruts and then to impassable mud the moment a thaw sets in, and the great river barges that carry supplies can be stopped cold by ice on the Rhine itself. When the wagons fall behind, as they now have for 2 days, your ration shrinks, and what remains is often frozen solid, forcing you to thaw it over a meager fire before you can even attempt to eat it. You have seen men sent out in foraging parties to strip the surrounding countryside of whatever grain or livestock the local tribes have not already hidden or burned, a task that carries its own quiet terror. Every foraging party that walks into the tree line knows it might not walk back out. You begin to understand why generals fear an early winter more than an enemy army. An enemy can be met and fought. An empty supply column cannot. Hunger and cold together open the door to something even more relentless: sickness. And it is here that you meet the man whose skill matters more than any centurion's vine staff. Every legion travels with its own hospital, a valetudinarium, staffed by a medicus and his orderlies. And in winter, this building never empties. Dysentery tears through the camp when men are forced to drink from contaminated streams. Pneumonia settles into the chests of soldiers who have spent too many nights standing wet and freezing on watch. You watch strong men who march 20 miles a day without complaint in the summer heat, wither and die from a fever within a week, never once having faced an enemy blade. The medicus does what he can with willow bark for fever and vinegar-soaked dressings for wounds. And Rome, to its credit, does provide for you if you are maimed in service. A small pension or discharge with honor if you survive long enough to earn it. But no compensation waits for the man who simply freezes to death in his tent. There is no glory in that kind of dying, only a quiet, unmarked grave dug into frozen ground by exhausted comrades who know they may be next. And the cold brings dangers that have nothing to do with disease at all. The roads that carried you here can vanish entirely under snow, stranding a column with no way forward and no way back. Worse, the great rivers that usually protect the frontier, the Rhine and the Danube, can freeze solid enough to walk across, turning a natural barrier into an open invitation for enemy warbands who know this land far better than you ever will. Fog and snow swallow sound and sight alike in a Roman column that prizes tight, visible formation above all else can be ambushed by men who melt in and out of the tree line like ghosts. Morale, already thin, frays further with every frozen night, and desertion becomes a whispered temptation even among men who swore an unbreakable oath. You have heard the older soldiers mutter that summer war is a contest of strength, but winter war is a test of whether the legion can survive itself. You are about to learn exactly how right they are. The column presses on into the Teutoburg Forest, strung out along a narrow track between dense trees and marshy ground, its supply wagons and camp followers stretching the line for miles. This is precisely the moment the German chieftain Arminius, once trusted, once trained by Rome itself, has been waiting for. The attack comes not as a single battle, but as days of relentless ambush. Waves of javelins hurled from the tree line, the column unable to form its famous shield wall in the mud and undergrowth. Rain turns to sleet, then to a driving cold that stiffens shields and numbs sword arms. You watch officers you have trusted for years struggle to hold formation, as the forest itself seems to close in around you, the enemy vanishing after every strike, the wagons bogging down, the wounded left where they fall because there is no time and no room to carry them. 3 entire legions, some 20,000 men, are destroyed here over the course of that terrible march. And when word reaches Rome, the Emperor Augustus is said to beat his head against the door, crying out for his lost legions to be returned to him. This is the disaster that will haunt the Empire's northern strategy for a generation, and it will never again attempt to hold territory beyond the Rhine. You survive, but you will carry what you saw for the rest of your life. And in the years after, you begin to notice how differently people speak of that winter compared to how you actually lived it. Let's look at 3 of the stories that grew up around soldiers like you. The first is the belief that the legions were unstoppable in any weather, an army so disciplined it simply overcame nature itself. This is almost entirely a myth. Rome's own commanders knew better, and wherever possible they avoided major winter campaigning altogether, retreating instead to fortified winter quarters, the Hiberna, to wait out the worst months. The image of the all-weather superhuman legionary comes largely from later histories that flattened years of caution into a single triumphant narrative, smoothing over just how often the cold, not the enemy, dictated Rome's plans. The second myth is that soldiers were issued heavy furs and thick wool as standard winter gear. In truth, equipment varied wildly by unit, era, and how well supplied a frontier happened to be. And early imperial soldiers often made do with whatever cloaks, the sagum, they could layer over their tunics, supplemented informally with captured or locally traded furs, rather than anything issued by Rome itself. The romantic image of a fully fur-lined legion comes largely from modern films and games, which favor a visually striking uniform over the patchier improvised reality. The third myth is that winter campaigning was a routine, even preferred tactic, catching enemies off guard in their settlements. In fact, the opposite was closer to the truth. Winter campaigns were rare, resource-draining gambles undertaken only when politics or a fleeting strategic opportunity demanded it, and disasters like the one you just survived are a large part of why Rome learned to fear that gamble more than almost any other. In the years that follow, you watch the Empire's frontier strategy change before your eyes. Augustus, shaken by the scale of the loss, abandons any ambition to conquer Germania beyond the Rhine, and the river itself hardens into a permanent boundary rather than a temporary staging line. Future emperors invest instead in permanent winter quarters, solid timber and stone forts where a legion can shelter through the worst months rather than march through them. A quiet admission that the Empire's greatest enemy on this frontier was never entirely human. So what became of men like you? Some died anonymously, swallowed by fever or frost, an unmarked mound of frozen earth, the only marker they ever existed. Some survived with a maimed hand or a lost foot, discharged early, their dream of that promised plot of land traded for a lifetime of pain in the cold months to come. Many more simply endured, completing their full 25 years, collecting an honorable discharge, a small pension, and a modest grant of land to farm out their remaining years in relative peace. and a rare few rose through the ranks entirely, becoming centurions themselves, carrying their own vine staff and their own hard-earned scars into old age, remembered by their descendants as men who survived what the forest, the frost, and the empire itself had thrown at them. Today, popular culture remembers the Roman legionary very differently. Hollywood epics and video games have turned him into an armored superhero, marching bare-armed through snow, indifferent to hunger, cold, or fear, an unstoppable symbol of imperial might. It is a compelling image, and it is almost entirely fiction. The honest truth is colder, slower, and far more human. It is the truth of a teenage recruit shivering through a night watch, of officers who feared an early frost more than an enemy warband, of an empire that learned, at devastating cost, that the harshest battlefield was never the one drawn on a map. Perhaps that is why the real story endures even now, because it reminds us that the greatest armies in history were still made of ordinary men, and ordinary men have always feared the cold. Thank you for joining me on this journey tonight, from the frozen frontier of ancient Germania to the myths that outlived the empire itself. Our march through history is at an end for now. I hope you'll return as we continue to explore the stories found in the shadows of the past. I wish you a calm and peaceful night.